Hi, my name is Brandon Moore.
My name is Linda Beth Norwood.
My name is Aiden Oslin.
Our presentation will be over Walker Brothers Cowboy by Alice Munro.
Hi, my name is Brandon Moore. I will be doing the biographical slide over Alice Munro. Alice Munro was born in Wingham, Ontario, in Canada on July 10, 1931. She was born Alice Laidlaw and was raised in rural southwestern Ontario on a fox and mink farm. Not all of her childhood was pretty. Her mother started showing signs of developing Parkinson's disease, and her father's fur company started to falter. She had to become the leader of the house while her father was working 2 jobs and trying to take care of her mother. She started her writing journey as a teenager and later went on to attend the University of Western Ontario. But after taking 1 year of journalism, she switched to honors English, where she received the best grades in the major. She then left the university and married James Munro. They had 3 children together and opened a bookstore in Victoria. Independent bookstores were rare during that time, and paperback lines were a new thing, so they faced many obstacles and challenges when setting themselves up. For Alice's 21st birthday, James gifted her a typewriter, which inspired her to pursue her writing career to the fullest. Her husband saw her as a writer and supported her work, but she couldn't commit fully to writing because of her children and domestic duties. Alice was repeatedly turned away from publishers and often struggled to balance her writing career with raising her daughters. In 1968, her first collection of short stories, Dance of the Happy Shades, was published. She drew inspiration from the rural part of southwestern Ontario, showing the emotion and intimacy of the landscape and the everyday life of its citizens. Before being married, she met Robert Weaver, who produced a radio program about Canadian writers and their stories for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, otherwise known as the CBC. He was a crucial instrument in kicking off Munro's early writing career. He treated her seriously as a writer and often helped with feedback and encouragement. In 1961, Alice Munro's first book was to be published after Earl Toppings, head of trade books at Ryerson Press, had discovered her literary works. After publishing her first book, Alice got support not only from readers but also from fellow writers such as Margaret Atwood and John Metcalfe. With Munro's publication of Lives of Girls and Women came an increased reputation, and the book was highly praised by feminists. Her reputation grew during a time in Canada where writers and other artists were finally being noticed and valued. All of this attention and fame came at a difficult time since she had just left her husband and they were trying to share custody of the kids. She left British Columbia for good and decided to move back to Ontario. She then decided to go teach creative writing at York University to try and make connections with the writing community. She decided to return home to Wingham and her father. In August of 1974, Munro was interviewed by another writer on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's radio channel. There were 2 listeners who would be a crucial part of her later writing career, Douglas Gibson and Gerald Fremlin. Douglas Gibson was an editorial director of the trade division of Macmillan of Canada. He used her interview as an opportunity to try and make her a Macmillan author. He accomplished his goal and had her next book, Who Do You Think You Are, with them, and all of her books since then. He never asked her for anything but short stories, and when he decided to break away from his company to start his own editorial corporation, Munro went with him and fought for him. Even more crucial to Munro's success story than Douglas was Gerald Fremlin. Gerald was a fellow student at Western Ontario University and read some of her works then. Munro was attracted to him during this time, and when Gerald found the interview, they reconnected. Munro said that if Fremlin hadn't reconnected, she might not have moved back to her hometown, which was crucial to her short stories moving forward. Munro shared an interest with Fremlin in landforms, geological history, and historical geography, which helped connect her stories to the landscape of southwestern Ontario. Munro's return to her hometown made a huge difference on her writing and it helped her make the complex emotions and the thorough lives of normal people in the land itself. One person who didn't hear the interview, but was still a very crucial part to Munro's success, was Virginia Barber, a literary agent in New York. She met up with Munro and had her send 7 of her short stories to the New Yorker, and they bought one of the 7 stories to publish. Later on, they considered her stories again and bought another. Then they realized they had a really good source of stories in Munro, so they had her sign a right of refusal contract with the New Yorker and had published 62 stories through them. Although the business deal with the New Yorker had only just begun to show its benefits, Munro's stories were highly highlighted by commercial magazines across North America. Since then, New Yorker has remained her primary venue for publishing her stories. Through her later work, she won many awards and eventually was named the Nobel Literature Laureate in 2013. She unfortunately died at the age of 92 on May 13, 2024 in Port Hope, Ontario.
This is Linda Beth Norwood, and I am doing the historical slide for our presentation. Walker Brothers Cowboy was written and released in 1968. Although the story itself is actually set in the 1930s, which was during the Great Depression. The author, Alice Munro, was born in 1930, so this story helps her connect some of the events of her childhood in order to create a very detailed short story. The time period the story was set in also makes the story make a lot of sense, considering the narrator and her family have been forced out of their old home because of her dad struggling with work. This is a reflection of Munro's childhood. Growing up during this time influenced a lot of her writing and showed how deeply the Great Depression affected people in rural Ontario. At the age of 12, Alice's mother started showing signs of Parkinson's disease, and her father's fur business started to decline, and he had to pick up another job. Alice had to start growing up quickly, doing duties such as cleaning, cooking, and looking after her younger siblings. While this is an unstable event for a child to experience at such a young age, it also caused her to spend more time in her imagination and thoughts, eventually leading to her writing career. Going through all these difficult experiences gave her the ability to portray life during this time in such an intimate and precise way. During the Great Depression, many Americans were out of a job, but many times Americans forget that the Great Depression also affected other countries and their people were also out of jobs, like Canada, which is where this story takes place. Canada was Munro's home growing up, and for her to feel comfortable enough to write a story going back to her roots is very respectable. Another historical event during this time period includes females finally rallying and advocating for themselves. For Alice Munro to write a story set in the Great Depression with a female protagonist is a statement for girls everywhere. The narrator, Del Jordan, is not your average girl. She states how she does not like it when her mother makes her dress up and go out onto the town. Alice Munro's story conveys that it's okay to be yourself. You don't have to be the average girl. Females are so much more than what they were made to be in the 1930s and all of the time before that. And I feel like Alice Munro does a really good job conveying that to young readers everywhere.
This is Aidan Oslin reading major works of Alice Munro. Lives of Girls and Women, written in 1971. A coming-of-age story about Del Jordan and her journey through adolescence as she grapples with family dynamics, friendships, societal expectations, and her own emerging identity, especially as a woman and a writer. Who Do You Think You Are? / The Beggar Maid, written in 1978. The same story but different titles in different regions. About a small-town girl who dreams of greater things, trying to get away from a place that wants to hold her back. The Moons of Jupiter, written in 1982. The main story and a mastery of contemporary short stories which reflects themes of mortality and the evolving relationships between a daughter and her father, using the metaphor of the shifting moons to mirror the instability and wonder of human life. The Progress of Love, written in 1986. won the Governor General's Award about 3 generations of mothers and daughters in rural Canada and their intricate relationships. It examines how personal memories and family narratives evolve over time, often revealing conflicting perspectives and emotional truths. Friend of My Youth, written in 1990, a distinguished collection of 10 short stories that explores themes of memory, aging, and regret, also won the 1990 Trillium Book Award.
This is Linda Beth Norwood, and I will be doing the summary slide. The narrator, her parents, and her brother live in Tuppertown, which is right next to Lake Huron. The story starts out with the narrator and her dad walking down to Lake Huron, while the mother is sewing and the brother is in bed. As they walk to the lake, she sees people sitting out in their yards and children playing, although her mother doesn't allow her or her brother to play with other children. She says that the brother is too young and the older daughter must respect that. After they pass the houses, they pass an old factory and lumber yard before coming to a little park by the lake. The narrator then describes what it looks like back toward the middle of town. There is a dark green building, known as a pavilion, where the farmers and their wives come in their stiff clothes on Sundays. Her family used to partly be a part of that crowd when they lived in Dungannon. They lived in Dungannon when her dad operated a fox farm, but eventually they started not making enough money and were forced into the city where the dad got a job working for Walker Brothers Cowboy, a firm that sells products in the country. The dad made a song about the products he sells there. The mom wasn't happy about losing the fox farm, but she only told one neighbor about it. In fact, she only talks to one neighbor ever, Mrs. Oliphant. She then goes on to explain how her mom doesn't really care about what anyone thinks about her, so she never really notices anything going on with the people in the background. The narrator also states how she does not like going out with her mom because she makes her dress and act like a proper young lady, and even though she doesn't care about what others think, the girl has to go around with her and can hear people laugh and whisper. Her mom also sometimes gets really bad headaches. One afternoon, whenever her mom gets one of these bad headaches, her dad invites her mom to go on his Walker Brothers Cowboy route with him, but instead, his 2 kids end up going on the route. He sings songs as he drives down the road on his route. He's a very lively person and tries to stay positive. Whenever he goes into people's houses, the kids must stay in the car, so they can only imagine what he says. Although sometimes he pretends he's in someone's farmhouse while trying to make his wife laugh. They go to many houses, but at one of the houses, no one answers the door. But instead, they throw some liquid in a pot out of the upstairs window to make him go away. The brother jokes that there was pee in the pot. He then takes them to a house outside of his territory. It was to an old friend of his, Nora Cronin, who is embarrassed by the way she's dressed, considering she wasn't expecting company. We find out the narrator's dad's name is Ben. Nora then takes them inside, where they meet her old, blind mother, Mrs. Cronin. Nora goes and changes, and then talks to their dad, Ben, about her sisters, Isabel, who married, and Munro, who is an unmarried schoolteacher. Shortly after Nora's mother falls asleep, they go to the front room that has a gramophone, a pump organ, and a vibrant picture of Mary, the mother of Jesus, which causes the girl to realize that Nora is Roman Catholic. Nora pulls a bottle out of the organ. This bottle has whiskey in it. Nora and Ben drink whiskey, which is weird because their mom says Ben never drinks whiskey. The daughter asks her dad, Ben, to sing. After this, Nora notices her brother looking at the gramophone and decides to put on a record. Nora then dances with the girl, who is not as good a dancer as Nora tries to make it seem. Then Nora tries to talk Ben into dancing with her, but he refuses many times. Then it's time to go home. Ben doesn't seem thrilled on the ride home, and when his son demands that he sings a song, he tells his son that he is all out of songs to sing.
This is Aiden Oslin reading Fun Facts about Walker Brothers Cowboy by Alice Munro. This setting is set during the Great Depression in Canada. Ben's new job as a Walker Brothers traveling salesman, peddling goods like toiletries, medicines, and ointments, becomes a symbol of their financial hardship. The point of view is through a little girl, which gives an innocent and limited aspect to the story. This point of view changes as she gets older and more mature. The encounter with Nora Cronin shows the father has had a life before the family and a different insight to his character. The reader can also infer that Ben, the narrator's dad, dated Nora when they were younger, adding a different insight to the character.